Coming Around Again, Chapter 1. 1931. On this morning, perhaps the hottest morning that summer, the river road shines with the reflected light that comes from the sun working the sloping sides of the hills on the roadside of the river. It shines on the mica in the dust of the mill yards across from the road, and it shines on the barbed wire fence. The fence protects the barracks set up in the mill yard for the scabs to occupy in case of a strike. The light twists and shines on all these things as on intricate and dangerous weapons. This morning, two gents stray up the slope leading down the mill road, headed in the direction of the Steel Workers' Hall to sign up for work at the mill. They are owly, found men in this early light. The taller of the two, carrying the heaviest valise, runs his hand along a railing bordering the sidewalk. The red dust colors his palm. Now he carries the hand out in the air like a mistake. That gent is Bonus Schaefer. The other one, the shorter one with sandy reddish hair, named Luther Trout, notices that Bonus has touched something again and swings his grip and whistles. This is some burg, he observes, after he has gone a few notes. 8 churches up from the depot and still counting. No need to love your neighbor here. You can just shift off to another congregation. You are not here as the advance man for a tent revival now, Lute, Bonus reminds him. Your business in Manessa is to help out your sister Emily. There is a silence of assent here, in which irresistibly Luther Trout checks over the burg in advance. You ever have a sister, Bonus? He asks, after a bit. He even picks up his stride to match Bonus's longer one. Lute, you know I never had a sister. I never had any family except the boys' foundling in Peeburg. Ah, then you do not know the mystery of sisters, Lute sighs. He is playing off Bonus and the foundlings. She's the one girl who knows all about you, and she swears she won't never tell, and then she tells it all over. And you don't have to give me any more nonsense about sisters, Lute, Bonus says. That's enough about sisters. Well, it's true. I ain't been next near or nigh old Emily for about 15 years, but I'll tell you, when I knew her, she was almighty righteous. Now she's lost her man and all. I figure she's one of them good-looking widows who likes being hung in black crepe because she wears it so well. If you feel that way, you shouldn't have said you'd help her, Bonus interfered sternly. I didn't say I would. You did, Lute said to him. All I said was, I'd like to have some place to hang my hat while Josiah got the show set up down south. Then I'd just hit for the sawdust trail. When he sent for me, I'd go on down with him and Maddie and stir around in Georgia and so on. You couldn't have gone anyway. You needed a place to dry out. You were sick, Bonus said reasonably. Very sick, had to dry out, Lute agreed, cheerfully, doing a little shuffle off the sand dance in the road for Bonus and for drying out. My God, he said suddenly, will you look what I see? And Bonus looked. Beyond the mill gates, a load of coke went up in steam, and as the cloud of white pillared the sky, as the road sloped down, he saw, for the first time, the crowd of men pressing down from the Steel Workers' Hall and swelling out over the river road. There was nothing like that in Denora, he said simply. Let's go, Lute said, eyeing the line, measuring on the line for a place to fit in. Because it was late in the season, there was a stretched quality about the crowd waiting for work. Though there was very little talking, there was a sound, which Lute and Bonus heard as they moved down the slope, the grating sound of shoes shuffling over the layer of fine grit that fell everywhere in Manessa. The sound came as the crowd moved and moved apart, each man in it independent, feral, and reluctant to be touched or touch anyone else. How will we get places in this? Bonus asked, his old anxieties rising in him. Emily wrote that we'd be able to get some time. I already told you that Emily's a doozy, Lute said, looking ahead. Already he was evaluating the crowd, sizing up the way it fell. Well, it was hard in Johnstown, and we got some time there, Bonus said, as if to reassure himself. Well, and we'll get some time here too, Lute said, beginning to move on the line. "Follow me," he said to Bonus, edging in, moving as the crowd moved until it moved apart for him, each move of his taking him deeper in with Bonus, following and holding his valise up in his arms as if it were a sick baby. "They're frightened, these fellas," Bonus thought to himself as he pushed after Loot. He was taller than most of the men on the road, and so as he moved after Loot, through the line and into the steelworkers' hall, he saw things. "Their heads are down and hungry. They don't want what they got to get. What kind of funny business is going on here?" Well, at least he was glad he'd made Loot come into the steelworkers' hall first thing, before they went up to the flat. He hoped he could get assigned to the roll mill. Even with the speed-up system in Denora, he had made good money in the roll mill, and he wanted to be sure of a day's pay before he saw Emily for the first time. Though Bonus had never actually met Emily, he had read her letters out to Loot when Loot was too sick from the drink to read them for himself. Bonus thought that after all he knew Emily pretty well, better even than Loot, her brother, who had not seen her for 15 years. And what he knew he liked. Bonus was a chipper ordinarily, but here in a new place he could see nobody cared what you did before. Chipping was easier work, but there were never enough drills on the job, and if you didn't get a drill, you couldn't do the work you'd been assigned. There were catches around in everything because of the hard times. He figured there'd be more probably in this place. He had to be careful. He wanted to avoid that one catch with the drills this time. So when he first saw Emily, when he first met her face to face, he would have that first day's pay. That was why he really wanted that roll mill job. "God, my feet hurt," Lutz said from behind him, shifting his weight back and forth over his feet in their fancy wingtip shoes. "How many do you suppose they'll take on this morning?" "Lucky if 50 get good places, mister," the man standing next to him said. "Cokie Joe," he introduced himself, bobbing in the line. "I've been laid off since October. I ain't worked since." "They got themselves quite a scab shed set up over there in the yard," Lutz said. "A two-shifter." "Yes, sir, that they do," Cokie Joe said with his face down, "in case there's a strike of some kind." "I got good pay set up the barracks over in Charleroi," Bonus put in from his height. "But that was a one-shift barracks like in the army." "They are planning on a strike down here?" "Done time in the army?" Cokie asked him, avoiding the question. "He got a medal," Lutz put in. "He got decorated." "I did get a medal," Bonus had to admit, "but it was nothing." "Nothing?" Cokie Joe looked up at him. "I was in the Great War. Nobody got decorated for nothing in that war. I should know. I was in it 3 years. I got shot trying to tell my captain that I wanted out of the front line, and it looked better than it was," Bonus said, embarrassed for what he had been trying to tell his captain. "Ah," Cokie Joe nodded. "Well, it was a common thing to be mistaken like that, over there," and he fell silent. In the Great War, when that was the case, there was no more to be said about it. They were silent then, among the men. Though feet moved, the silence waited. Then from the sides of the hall, 6 badges came down and stood against the line. Uniformed and armed, they were the mill police, and there for any kind of trouble. The clerks followed, passing to the back of the hall where the tables were set up. Each clerk had a list of jobs. They wrote on their cards, and the cards went up to the auctioneer, who stood on a wooden platform and called the jobs. 3 hands for the wire mill, desk number 2. At least 20 men struggled forward. "I can do that. I'll do that," waiting to claim the slips that came with the call. "I hope I can get me a place," a man back of Lutz says, smacking his hands together. "What do they pay down here?" Lutz inquires. "They pay scrip," Cokie Joe says. "They've been giving us company money for nearly 4 months now." 4 months? You mean Emily knew they was paying in scrip for 4 months and still she got us to come down here? Lutz whistles at that. He is amazed. To work for scrip? "Isn't that Soaker Watson?" Bonus says suddenly from his height. "Isn't that Soaker Watson who is calling the jobs?" "The hell you say!" Lutz brightens at that and goes up on his toes, peering front. Yes, that looks like old Soaker up there." "Hey, Soaks," he calls. "Let me through. Let me through." He pushes back, then forward in the line, with Bonus following. "Soaker's a pal of mine," he says as he moves. "Door boy, the auctioneer, who is named George Watson, calls out. Desk 5. Half a dozen men struggle to get the table 5 slip. I can do that. I'm a good hand. 4 men are picked and sent off for the one job, racing across the road to the mill gates, trying to beat each other's time. If you are the first, you will get the job, they think, though they know it is the floor boss who gets the final pick. Sometimes you're off so long you can't stand the pace no more, Cokie Joe says, following behind in Bonus's wake. A couple of guys got hot mill cramps the first time they were taken on after they'd been off a time. Nearly died from it. 15 mutters, the auctioneer calls out. By now it is clear to Lute that it really is Soaker Watson, and he whoops and waves to him. 10 cents an hour, Lute Soaker calls. Hey, that's real money, is the response, and 50 men push and shove in the line for 10 cents an hour. Hope I don't have to spend another day in the crapper, Lute says loudly. I didn't bring nothing to read. Top fillers, desk number 1, was the call. No spark of recognition from Soaker on that one. Let me through. Let me through. Cokie Joe's voice is high and strained against the soundless bullying of the others trying to get through. Hey, Lute shouts out. I'm a top filly. I'm a roll hand. I'm a big executive from Hoover City. You got some real work to put up there for me? This time there's a sign in the air. Soaker has seen Lute and has marked him out in the crowd, and he shows he has certainly seen Bonus. A card comes up, and then 2 more. 8 chippers, 4 roll hands, loaders. Got to get up there, Bonus says to those pushing around him, pushing forward. Even though there are 5 times the number called, he gets a slip. He gets a slip for a job in the rolling mill, and Lute gets a slip for loading scrap and signs the air back to Soaker Watson, who grins and nods. You shouldn't have done that, Bonus worries, hurrying, like Lute to the mill gates. Like the others, he is still not certain of a place. Trading on your friendship and all. Lots of things I shouldn't have done, Lute says, stepping out. God, I can whistle like a bird. I can do a soft shoe routine good enough for the twirling circuit. And here I go, hustling for old Brown's script money. Loading. Emily needs that money, Lute, Bonus said, holding up his valise, obsessed with hurrying. So what if she does, Lute said. Why don't we just hit us a boxcar and go on west? No, Lute, Bonus said. He could see the mill gates just ahead. There were the other men crossing over, some with children trailing after them with lunch pails. If he didn't hurry, the job would go. The catches would be in place. At the thought, his legs moved, so long in the mica shine that was the mill yard, that Lute couldn't keep up with him. Well, why not go west, Lute called after him. Bonus was hunting up his card for the coal and iron police. I've been there. I did that, he called back, waving back to Lute and dodging ahead of a man he saw coming out of the corner of his eye. Lute looked around. It was morning, still morning. He saw the sunlight turn on the hills. He whistled a blackbird through some wires and around a smokestack. God, how he loved the morning. Seemed like his days built up with their own poison, but here, in the morning, it was all honey in the Lord's cup. Ahead of him, the door to the charging floor was open. He could feel the big fires burning in the ground beneath his feet, drumming against the soles of his feet. A fire like that demands admiration, he thought, crossing the vast acreage that was the mill yard, with the fire beneath his feet. He thought about how it was all done to fire in the mills, those times. The fire was what you served. The fire was what you fed from the railroad buggies full of scrap iron. It was the fire that tapped out into red gold ingots, that fumed and died with you in place as witness. Ahead of him, there was a crowd of men and the boss. Lute looked the crowd over because he had to know the crowd. After years of working the sawdust trail, the revival circuit with Josiah and Mattie Waters, that was what he knew, what he understood. A couple of green hands standing around, he thought. The ones down front is working a plug of tobacco like he ain't got it down yet. There are 3 or 4 hard chargers by the look of 'em. The rest piece workers. You're late, the boss said. He looked a heavy. The kind with the fist who did everything just right. Took a pee, Lute said. The green hands shifted and giggled. Door boy, the boss read from his clip. A man passed in a slip folded over. The boss took the slip, nodded. The man went to take his place from the other shift. I was signed to be door boy, a pained man said. Job's gone, the boss said, looking him down. I was signed back at the hall, the man insisted, trying to smile. The smile showed Lute that the smiler was a ready man, a man who had worked jobs up and down the river, but who had never worked at the piece rate in a brown money town. I got the slip here that says, job's gone, the slip is too late. The boss looks down on his list. I just wish you'd look at it, the man insisted, getting wise, folding the paper over some green money. Here, he said, holding the slip so the boss could see the dupe in it. Holding the folded slip of paper against the clipboard, the boss took out the green. Loader, he said, nodding, and then going on. Yes, sir, the man bobbed. Already sweating and moved off to where the buggies waited to be filled with limestone and loaded onto the cars. That left the boss king to 10 men now, the losers, Luke reckoned. The ones he would work for what he could get. The boss looked over the 10, a little empty smile at the corners of his mouth. I got 2 places left for dock loaders, and that's it, he said, and waited. Of course, some of you can hang around in case there's an accident of some kind. I can do the job. I was promised a job. The hell you were, one man glared at another. And Luke kept an eye on the house, watching the boss, watching the others. He had, like the rest of them, got a slip at the steel hall that promised him a day's work. Another day in the crapper, he sorrowed to himself. And I didn't bring nothing to read. The boss looked them over, spreading his feet, rocking a little heel to toe. You all got them slips, he asked. Sure we do. The men held them out. That all you got? The boss looked down his list. Don't tell me that's all you got. That's all they give me, a man standing in the front said, shaking his head. They didn't say I was to have anything more. The green hand spoke then, getting the message. I got something else, he said, having just learned a lesson. I got something besides this slip. He was just a boy with pale eyes and a spray of acne across his jaw. What you got? The boss spat into the dust. A mean hand when it came to the job trade. He knew the kid had no money. Brown or green, there was no money left in this bunch. My sister, the kid said, low-voiced, intimate. My sister. The boss's face flushed, and his glance went stolid. You think I'm some kind of a whoremonger here? He said, his voice thick with a kind of righteous indignation. Suppose you just walk on. The boy backed off a little. These is the last jobs I got, the boss mourned. Why do I have to deal with lunatics and washouts when I get to the last jobs? You already cleaned up, another hand said, sullen, eyes down. Get on out of here, the boss held the clip, marked across it with his pencil. I'll remember talk like that, now blow. The boss looked over the clip at them. It's time for the Chinese run, Luke thought to himself. Boss man's going for the nickel haul. The boss looked at the man in front, the man who said he'd been promised a job. What's your name? He said, taking his slip. Cherry Wills. You're a big man, the boss said, acting kindly disposed. You been a mill hand long? I've been a lot of things, Cherry Wills said, looking down. I've been an iceman and a dray loader. I dumped slag. I fed a Bessemer. Cherry worked his history in its slow turns. You've been a lot of things, the boss agreed with him. You've been a lot of things. But you ain't learned it takes more than a slip of paper to get a job on this floor. Cherry Wills shook his head from side to side, his hands in his pockets. I don't have nothing today. Maybe I could get a hold of something tomorrow. The boss looked at him. Then you'll get a job by me tomorrow. Today you double. You all double, he said. Then his eyes found Luther Trout's wing-tip shoes and his lizard skin grip. You coming or going? He asked, a little sharp smile forming, thinking that he was on to something after all. There was a mean snicker from the others, backed off now and waiting for bad luck to set their time. I got something, Lute said softly, but it ain't something I can stuff inside the slip of paper they gave me at the Steelworkers Hall. What I got is called Vital, and I got it off a negra I met in New Orleans. This Vital has a powerful effect on the organs. It turns old peckers into sweet potatoes, makes the men collect like organized religion, and the women beg for more. You talking about something like Spanish fly? The boss said, leaning down. I heard a Spanish fly. I heard that it's a joke. That's as it may be, Lute deadpanned up at him. But Vital don't come from the same family. Like dynamite doesn't come from a party snapper. I've been saving this little bit for myself, but I'm a single gent and I can't afford the pleasure. The pale-eyed kid, who had gone nowhere until that moment, decided to sidle in. Hey, he said, you could really get the use of my sister if you... Get back. Back off now, Lute warned him. This ain't no deal cut for no skinny sister off no buckwheat boy. There's two places, mister, the boy said, looking sullen. Lute looked at him. A kid who pimps his sister was like no kind he'd ever come across. But since he had a live one on the line, he opened his valise and pulled out his little package of Vital, wrapped up in a piece of old Loreto newspaper, smeared in Spanish-speaking, and handed it up to the boss. The boss was reading some kind of a card the kid had given him. You kin to this Sally? He asked the kid. You sure this is good? I'm her grandson, Pale Eyes replied, and it's good any time. Shoot. Silver Susie's grandson. The boss nearly dropped his clipboard on that one. Loaders, he said, taking the package Lute offered him, looking the two of them over. Loaders, you got the jobs. Loaders at the piece rate. You paying piece rate to a loader? Lute said, incredulously. Piece rate? The boss only turned his back on them and walked away, and so Lute and the boy cleared out of the shed and into the shine. Lute with his shoes and his valise, walking down to where the buggies waited to be loaded with scrap. Already he was a tagged man, a sandy man with a randy kid on his tail calling, Was that stuff you called Vital Spanish fly, mister? Hey, was that really like Spanish fly?